Namaste, namaskaram, vanikam, namo namaha. Let's do some mystical math today. And for all the New Agers out there who say all is one, is that bad math? Before systems, before institutions, before identity. In the most basic sense, all religious spiritual traditions can be understood through the language of elementary math, addition and subtraction. Addition builds. Subtraction reveals, in this case. Addition says become more. Subtraction says remove what you are not. The monotheistic religions stand in stark contrast to the Eastern, if you will, religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jain, Sikh, Shinto, Taoist, for example. The former must add salvation, so to speak, while the latter seeks to remove the obstacles to what is already present. From the Tanakh, quote, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Isaiah 55:8, end quote. From Christianity, quote, "God is in heaven, and you are on earth, so let your words be few," unquote. Ecclesiastes 5:2. From Islam, quote, "There is nothing whatever like unto him." Quran 42:11, unquote. Obviously, Yahweh, God, and Allah are external to the individual, and one must enter into a relationship. In contrast, the very first two great sayings, Mahavakyas, of Hinduism is Tat Tvam Asi, that art thou, thou art that, and Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, meaning one is divine. However, it is also logically clear that Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs, for example, do follow specific rituals in order to fully realize this innate divinity. Apparently, one can find similar understandings in other religions as well. And one also must always remember that each individual in every religion have their own unique experiences. For there is very much a personal aspect to all religions, in Hinduism and its offshoots. There is the recognition of the manyness, polymorphic nature, and many Hindus have their Ishtadevata, or valued deity. Patanjali epitomized that. Hindus also recognize the no-thangness, shunya, which is the binary system, 0 and 1, or 0 and the 1 many. And remember, it was the Hindus who gave the world the gift of the 0 for mathematical calculations. Honestly, however, over time, most traditions move toward addition, more structure, more identity, more belief, more expression. This is natural. It organizes, it sustains, and expands. But the origins of these same traditions often point in the opposite direction: subtraction, less attachment, less identity, less accumulation, less noise. Not because less is morally superior, but because less reveals what is internally more. This tension is not abstract, it's lived. It appears in the yogi, yogini, and renunciates of all the religions, the mystics, the shamans. It appears in an individual's life. It can be expressed simply: when there's nothing to add, nothing to prove, nothing to become, nothing to defend. These are not statements of passivity. These are statements of clarity. Because when there's nothing to add, there's nothing missing. When there's nothing to prove, there's nothing insecure. This is a transcendent experience, meaning one has climbed through the many experiences of life, not transvalued. They didn't skip over. And when there's nothing to defend, there's nothing threatened. And yet, the general human tendency is to do the opposite: to add, to construct, to optimize, to identify. Look at the shift that's taken place in the world of yoga today. And by the way, the Sanskrit Hindu word yoga actually has nothing to do with the physical body. Yuj Atman Brahman Cha, to yoke to the inner essence, which Hindus call the Atmana, and Brahman, the greater source, not God. And it's not merely a change in style in today's yoga, and it's not simply cultural adaptation, it's a whole reversal of direction. Yoga, as given in the classical Hindu tradition, is a path of renunciation. Modern yoga, as commonly practiced today, has largely become a system of optimization. However, with many pointing out the external nature of today's yoga, this may result in many taking the opposite direction, and round we go on the wheel of life. If we look at real Ashtanga yoga, for example, as opposed to the modern Ashtanga fitness paradigm, we find two systems here, one antithetical to the other. Let's look at a little counterpoint. 1. Yoga is a Hindu path rooted in dharma, with the goal of kaivalya liberation, not to become something, to become less, the no-thingness, purushartha sunyam. Today's modern Ashtanga yoga is a wellness product, stripped of Hindu context, and the goal is health, fitness, and lifestyle. Okay, if that's what one was into, but that's not the yoga path. Asana in classical yoga is minimal. No postures are listed at all in the Yoga Sutras. Just one steady, comfortable one. Why? For meditation, not for display. To go beyond duality, dvandava and bhagataha. Today's asana is performance. Hundreds of postures for aesthetics, for social media, branding, marketing. Classical yoga, the direction is where? Inward. From stillness to samadhi, transcendence of duality. The modern Ashtanga yoga direction is outward, constant stimulation, engagement with the world. Classical Hindu yoga, yamas and niyamas are non-negotiable. Ahimsa, satya, steya, brahmacharya, parigraha, saucha, santosha, tapaha, svadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana. In today's Ashtanga yoga, we have ethical principles are totally diluted. Ahimsa is redefined. Satya is compromised, obviously. Asteya by appropriation. Brahmacharya ignored, that's celibacy. Aparigraha, non-receiving, is contradicted. Modern contradictions. Body focus versus disidentification. Monetization versus aparigraha. Branding versus renunciation. Partial teaching versus satya. Conclusion. If it's not the Yoga Sutras, if it's not yoga, why call it that? Instead, call it stretching, breath work, relaxation, fitness, or return to the source and teach it as Hindu yoga. Clarity is not an option here. It's the practice itself. Let's continue now with this cycle of religion. From renunciation to optimization. There's a pattern that repeats itself across time. Across culture, various religions, and it's not unique to any religious spiritual tradition. It's not confined to East or West. It's a human pattern. Every great religious spiritual tradition begins in renunciation. Over time, it evolves into optimization, and eventually it must rediscover its original clarity or risk completely losing it. In the beginning, the renunciate is at the origin of nearly every tradition. not as an institution, but as an individual, not a system, but a realization. Consider, for example, Yeshua, who later had his name and his religion changed to Jesus the Christ or Christian. Apparently, he was a wandering, possessionless, Aramaic-speaking Jew, teaching through presence. The Buddha left behind royalty in search of truth. And what's his classic saying? If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, meaning, don't focus on me. Interestingly, you can find a Buddha in, quote-unquote, many gardens, in stores, etc. I wonder what the Buddha would think of that. Even the Prophet Muhammad, he retreated to the cave, receiving in solitude in his night of excellence. The Vedic rishis, yogis, were forest seers off the grid. They were not temple authorities. They were not optimizers of systems. They were renunciates of them. They didn't seek to improve identity. They sought to see through it. They did not build structures. They stepped out of them or beyond them. What begins as a realization begins to take form. Teachings are preserved, communities gather, practices are shared, systems emerge. This is natural, actually. Without structure, the insight might disappear. Without community, teachings might dissolve. So religion forms. It's inevitable. Optimization begins once structure exists. Questions arise. How do we spread this? How do we organize this? How do we make it accessible? How do we sustain it? How do we make money? And eventually, how do we succeed as personalities, as individuals within it? This is optimization. What was once inward, silent, renunciate, becomes outward, expressed, systematized. Not necessarily wrong, but fundamentally different. Now, there may come a time, though, when means replace the end, and something perhaps beginning subtly occurs. The structure originally created to preserve the teachings begins to replace the teachings. Identity, brand name, replaces realization. Belonging replaces understanding. Practice replaces purpose. Form replaces essence. The path may no longer be about liberation. It becomes about participation. This happens. It's easy to point outward, but the same pattern exists within every tradition, including Hinduism. The renunciate ideal remains the same. Aparigraha, non-attachment, vairagya, dispassion. Just consider another English word that sounds like that, which is only about attachment. In practice, though, temples accumulate wealth, identities form around rules, rituals become ends in and of themselves. In today's yoga, which was originally rooted in stillness, becomes performance. Interestingly, when many people say, oh, yoga predates Hinduism. Really? So prior to Hinduism, thousands and thousands of years ago, there were 200-hour certified yoga teachers, yoga studios, yoga pants, making six figures as a yoga teacher. So the question becomes not which religion is true, but what happens to truth over time. Perhaps now we see the full picture. Both forces are present, renunciation and optimization. Renunciation preserves the depth. Optimization ensures survival. Without renunciation, the truth becomes diluted. Now the danger is forgetting the direction. The problem arises when optimization forgets its origin, when the structure no longer points back to renunciation. At that point, growth replaces insight. Success, branding, name recognition replaces truth. Human religion, spirituality seems to move in spirals. This is evolution, rather than straight lines. What begins in renunciation, simple, direct, uncompromising, gradually becomes systematized, then optimized, then commercialized, and just when it appears most externalized, perhaps something in the human spirit recoils, turns in again, and rediscovers renunciation. Round and round we go, not in circles but in spirals, each turn offering the possibility of deeper understanding. Perhaps even in the excesses of commercialization, there serves a hidden purpose. It may awaken a longing, a return to what cannot be bought, branded, or sold. In a sense, from cave to marketplace, from marketplace back to cave, humanity keeps circling the same fire, sometimes warming itself, sometimes getting burned. Look at the scandals that have arisen in all religions. Perhaps the goal is not to escape the cycle, but to finally see it. Rediscovering the source. Throughout history, something remarkable happens. At certain moments, individuals arise again, not to build, but to remind. They return to simplicity, silence, renunciation. They don't really destroy the structure, they reveal its purpose. They bring the tradition back to its source. It's up to us to question. Are we preserving truth? Expanding structure? Or mistaking one for the other? Every religious tradition carries within it both possibilities. The path of removal, subtraction, the path of addition, which often leads to division. One leads inward. One moves outward. Like the breath. Both have their place, but only one leads to liberation. Tarivartramata nirbasis iva samadhi sunyam. The founders renounced. The followers organized. The institutions optimized. And it's up to every generation to decide, every individual to decide, whether to inherit the structure or perhaps rediscover the essence. The reformer's role at the point of separation. Now, there are moments in the life of a tradition when the question is no longer about balance within it. It's no longer simply renunciation versus optimization, subtraction versus addition. It becomes something else. A threshold is reached where a movement begins to step outside the tradition altogether. Not merely expanding it, not merely adapting it, but totally redefining it. And at that point, a new question arises. What is the role of the reformer now? When the cycle becomes a split within a tradition, clarity gives rise to structure. Structure gives rise to complexity. Complexity gives rise to critique. Critique returns it to clarity. That's natural. It's the rhythm of continuity. But, again, the movement sometimes does not return. It diverges. A new path forms. And historically, along with that division, often comes violence. Now, to those who say that the cycle is inevitable, and why speak out? If the reformers did not perform their difficult task, their duty, the cycle would not be a cycle. The critic is not against the cycle, but is the mechanism by which the cycle continues. They try to catch the distortion before it hardens. This is a simple piece of advice. Handle problems when they're small problems. Nip it in the bud, if you will. Before they spread, before they become something difficult to undo. Distortion does not usually begin as something dramatic. It does not announce itself. It begins quietly. A slight shift in meaning, a small omission, a reinterpretation without context, an addition that seems harmless at first. In fact, things may seem to be improved, more accessible, more appealing, more adaptable. We recognize that human spirituality, if you will, seems to move in these spirals. What begins in renunciation, simple, direct, uncompromising, gradually becomes systematized, commercialized, and just when it appears most external, again, something happens in the human spirit. People wake up. They awaken to the longing to return to what cannot be bought, cannot be branded or sold. Again, from cave to marketplace, marketplace back to cave. We humans, we keep circling the same fire, warming ourselves sometimes, getting burned. So the bottom line is that the renunciates remove illusion, simplify, reveal essence. The organizers build structure, create systems, sustain community. Critical reformers question excess, expose distortions, repoint to origins. And round we go. Never stopping. Why not seek love? Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.